so unexpected.
It's one of those you had to be there moments.
You had to be there.
It subsequently genuinely did change everything about my life.
You had to be there.
Morning, Ken. How are things? Keeping well. You sent on your list yesterday, and Jesus, it's impressive. The one thing that jumped out to me straight away, in terms of your top 5 in-person sporting performances or moments, there's not one snooker match. There's not one mention of the Crucible or Ali Pali. You've left it out completely.
Well, I thought, so used to seeing so many snooker matches, great snooker matches over the years. I thought, I'll just keep away from my own sport and just tell you about some of the experience I've had in other sports, watching other sports and watching some of the greats play. And some of my greatest sort of sporting moments, for our own country as well, which was fantastic,
Yeah, it's not, I think, the common trait that we've had from people picking their... I think Tommy Welch did his last week, but it's a stressful thing to try and pick, because for people like yourself who've been to so many sporting events, it's probably hard to narrow it down.
Yeah, it was hard to narrow. I mean, I didn't put the rugby in there. I was just looking through the list. I didn't put the Ireland-England game at Croke Park, which was a very emotional game.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't put Chris Eubank or Collins in there down in Cork. And I think my first time at Cheltenham, which was a few years ago, I spent 4 days with Phil Tufnell as the Irish sort of Prestbury Cup captain, and that was a wonderful experience in itself. Particularly just spending 4 days with Phil Tufnell, but particularly at Cheltenham, we had a right old laugh, and I think that was one of the greatest experiences. I mean, John Parris been going to Cheltenham for the last 40 years, and I've never seen I was only there once, and he was there for the first days, and there I was in the parade ring, picking up the Prestbury Cup, and he's watching it, sitting at home on his couch watching it, and he's looking at me, he said, Doherty, James, he says, Doherty you get where water wouldn't, He's been there for 30 years, he's never picking up any trophies in the parade ring, but there was our first time there, and I'm picking up the Prestbury Cup. It was quite, it was amazing,
Isn't it Forrest Gump, where he has all the photos behind him where he's everywhere and he's met all the presidents and he's been in every war and sporting event. It seems like you're not far off, Ken, with your list either.
Yeah, the lineup is so impressive.
It's unreal.
Well, I mean, some of them. I mean, the first one we're going to talk about.
Yes, we'll kick off 1984. So Giant Stadium, Ireland, Italy.
The Giant Stadium. I mean, it was 1994. We qualified for the World Cup. It was in America. They were playing in New York, and then they were playing in Florida. So I thought, well, great chance to go and watch Ireland play, but also, and particularly in the Giant Stadium in New York, but also to have a little holiday, and to go and see that match at the Giant Stadium, and probably Paul McGrath's he had so many, but that was probably his most defining. And to beat Italy at the Giant Stadium. I mean, when we went there, we thought it's going to be full of Italians, it's going to be very small Irish crowd. It was hard to get tickets and stuff like that. And when we arrived there, I mean, it was just a sea of green. It was a very small. It was quite the opposite. It was a very small amount of Italians there, blue flags or whatever, and the rest of it was just a sea of green. The atmosphere was electric. From start to finish, and Ireland, and that Ray Houghton goal, well, that was just one of the best goals that Ireland had ever scored, and against the giants of Italy, and to beat them. I mean, the team that they had, I mean, Baggio was up front, and they had such an array of wonderful, talented players, but Ireland just played them off the park, and it was just it was one of those moments where you as you say, you had to be there.
I watched back the highlights last night, and it was probably the sea of green that really struck me. The scarves, it was like everybody had a hat on. This must have been the thing. Like everybody was wearing an Irish hat. It just really struck me. I was like, whoa, that looks like a crack.
Yeah, it was great crack. And it was so hot there. It really was very, very hot. The weather was stifling. But the goal, I mean, it came out of nowhere, and just the way he chipped Pagluga, was it, who was in goal, and then everybody went mad. It was just it was sort of a carnival time, and it was just wonderful to be there and experience that, and then to go on and hold them, and for them not to score and get the win. It was just it was a dream sort of come true for Ireland. It was a wonderful performance,
I'd forgotten, Ken, as well, that the goal from Houghton is after 12 minutes. So as you say, Ireland had to hold on for a seriously long time against the Italians. That's not an easy thing to do either.
No, not at all. And that's why I was saying, I think Roy Keane, Paul McGrath particularly, the way he sort of held that defence together, some of the defensive headers and the tackles and everything. And just to hold on for that for the rest of the 90 minutes, and, it was one of the most famous victories I think we've ever had, without a doubt. That in 1990, of course, as well in Italy. But yeah, just to to see that, and just you thought it was like a home match. You thought you were in Lansdowne Road. At one stage it was that good, and it was just a real sort of wonderful party atmosphere. I managed to meet people around you, obviously I'm from Ireland, and just having fun, singing songs, and they managed to get us on the bus. We jumped on the bus back to New York. We sort of bunked on their bus basically. They sort of took us in, and we had a right old crack with them that night. It was fantastic.
You would have been 24 or 5, so you'd have moved over to the UK at this point. So this is 3 years before you win the World Championship. But so you went over from the UK, I guess, for the little mini break. Was that the thinking behind it?
Yeah, it was just like, the fact that it was in Florida, you could go to SeaWorld and the water parks and see all that, and have a week down in Florida and a week in New York. And I remember checking into one hotel, the Roosevelt, and it was an absolute dump. It was, it really was. So we had to check out of there. I had to ring Eamon Dunphy, because he was over there as a journalist, of course. And he was staying in a beautiful little small boutique hotel called the Elysium, and he managed to get us a room in there. So we managed to stay in there for the week, which was lovely. But when we checked into the Roosevelt, my girlfriend at the time, she cried her eyes out. She said, "How could you bring me to this place?" But it worked out in the end, and we had a great time.
Unreal. So you were in the bad books for a couple of days, but
it was, I had to make up for it. Yeah, cost me a fortune, but.
Worth it.
It was worth every penny.
100%. Your second pick, Ken, is 1997, Old Trafford, Manchester United against West Ham. I was thinking yesterday, so when you said this on, I was like, okay, it was Eric Cantona's last competitive game for United, so that's why it's memorable. But I'm just thinking about the dates here. So this was May the 11th, and you had won the World Championship on May 5th. So for a number of reasons, this was special for you. This is only less than a week after you became World Champion. Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, this wouldn't mean a lot to a lot of people who say, what, Eric Cantona's last match? It wasn't really about that, but it was a very special day for me because, it was 6 days after winning the World Championship. I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognise, and I picked up the phone, and the message went, it says, "Hello, Kenny, this is Alex Ferguson here. I know you're a big Man United fan. How about coming to Old Trafford and parading that trophy?" And I thought it was one of my mates, and I told him but I said, "Stop messing me, will you? Stop winding me up, And he says, "Kenny, this is Alex Ferguson here. I'm not going to ask you a second time, I said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Ferguson. Of course, I'd love to go to Old Trafford, and parade the trophy." Well, he brought me. I went over, arrived on the morning. And he took me into his office, showed me. They were collecting the Premiership trophy that day. And I got he brought Bobby Charlton in and Martin Edwards. And I got some lovely photographs with the World Championship trophy next to the Premiership in his office. And then he brought me down to meet the players who were having their sort of pre-match meal. And I walked down with the cup, and he walked in, and we had sort of the first team on the first table and the second team on the second table, before all in the line, So I walked in, I'm standing at the door with the cup, and he goes, "Gentlemen," he says, "Ken Doherty, big Man United fan," he says, "just brought his World Championship trophy, and he's going to parade it at half time, So they're all like, munching into their pasta or whatever, and they just look around and they just like stare at me, and nobody moved. And I'm making eye contact with Roy Keane and Dennis Airwood, who I would have met over the years, to say, "Are you going to come over and say hello?" I didn't know whether to go to them or what was going to happen. So I'm standing there, and the beads of sweat now are starting to drip down. The cup is starting to get a little bit heavy in my hand. And next of all, big fella at the end of the table pushed the chair back, walked over to me, stood in front of me. I'm looking up at him. I'm like a little schoolboy, and he said to me, "Congratulations, Mr. Doherty, and welcome to Old Trafford." And I had a lump in my throat, and I says, all I could say was, "Thank you, Mr. Cantona." It was Eric Cantona that came over. It was like quite a surreal moment. And that was his last match that he played for United. And I always say, I drove Cantona out of Trafford because when he saw snooker players coming to parade their trophy at Old Trafford, he thought, this place has gone to the dogs. I'm out of here.
Screw this, I'm gone.
Isn't that unbelievable that Alex Ferguson, that's the way he was thinking before, such a massive game. He obviously thought that you were going to have an impact of you bringing the trophy in, seeing that, you've won the World Championship, that this would have an impact on the lads, because there's definitely reasoning behind it.
Yeah, I mean, it was such a nice gesture. Dennis Taylor gave him a number. I'd never met Alex before or anything like that. Dennis Taylor gave him a number. He loves the snooker. He was watching it all week. He was willing me on, and I think he had a bet on me as well, maybe, even though I was playing Stephen Hendry. But I mean, it was just such a lovely man, and just made me feel so welcome. And walking out onto the middle of that pitch, being introduced with the cup, and my legs were like jelly, as I walked out. And it was quite funny, they're all singing, there's only one Ken Doherty, and then of course all the West Ham lads, they were up from London, obviously they're all singing, there's only one Ronnie O'Sullivan,
Giving it the large one.
So you can't have it every way, but it was just an amazing experience. I was so lucky that year because I was invited out into Croke Park for the Dublin Mead Leinster final. I was invited out into the middle of Lansdowne Road for a World Cup qualifier against Liechtenstein, I think it was that year. And I was invited out to Celtic Park as well once. I was invited out to Celtic Park for the half-time draw. And unbeknown to me, John Higgins was in the Celtic end, because a big Celtic supporter, and he didn't know I was being invited out around. He was just sitting in the crowd with his brother, at the match. And he rings me up. He says, I can't believe I'm sitting in the crowd. He says, there you are coming out into the middle of the pitch. You don't even follow Celtic, he says,
It's a real Celtic thing.
But it was amazing. Irish. It was amazing. So it was a very special day, that Old Trafford. That Old Trafford moment, and of course it was Eric Cantona's last match as well.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think it's 6 days. 6 days previous, you'd won the World Championship, and 6 days later, I think Cantona shocks the world. Certainly shocked United fans with his announcement, his retirement. Just a quick tangent to mention: there's an announcement that's come in from the IRFU. Andy Farrell's Irish squad for the 2023 Six Nations Championship is in, and one uncapped player named in the squad. We've got Leinster's Jamie Osborne, who has made it, first integrated, of course, in November 2021 as a development player. He's since featured for the Emerging Ireland and Ireland A teams. So just to quickly mention the scrum, the squad in its entirety, starting with the scrum halves. You've got Craig Casey, Jemison Gibson Park and Conor Murray. The out halves named are Ross Byrne, Jack Crowley and Captain Johnny Sexton. The Irish centres, Bundy Aki, Stuart McCluskey, Jamie Osborne and Gary Ringrose. The outside backs named in the squad by Andy Farrell are Keith Earls, Mac Hansen, Hugo Keenan, Jordan Larmour, James Lowe, Jimmy O'Brien and Jacob Stockdale. The props are Finlay Beelum, Tyke Furlong, Cian Healy, Dave Kilcoyne, Tom O'Toole and Andrew Porter. Three hookers, Rob Herring, Ronan Kelleher and Dan Sheehan. The locks named Tyke Byrne, Ian Henderson, Joe McCarthy and James Ryan. And the back row named by Andy Farrell finally: Ryan Baird, Jack Conan, Gavin Coombs, Caelan Doris, Peter O'Mahony, Cian Prendergast and Josh van der Freer. We will chat to Ian Keatley in around 10 or 15 minutes time on that squad its entirety. Back to, you had to be there with Ken Doherty. Ken, another massive pick for you here, and it's quite obvious why you've picked this one. What a moment for Manchester United fans. The Nou Camp, May 1999, May 26th I think it was, against Bayern Munich, and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's last gasp heroics. Where were you sitting in the Nou Camp?
Well, believe it or not, I was sitting not far from the corner flag in the second, where they actually scored the goal. So, we were like a good few rows up. I mean, the Nou Camp is such an impressive stadium. It's absolutely massive. It was packed to capacity. And we had really good seats, in the United end and right close to where that corner, where Beckham took that corner, in both corners, it was... it was quite amazing. I mean, I was lucky to get there, to be honest. I was going with a few Man United supporters from London, and I travelled over from Dublin. And back in 1999, years ago, you didn't need your passport or anything like that travelling to London. You just didn't ever ask you for any ID or anything like that, so you could try. And of course, I was so used to hopping back and forth to London and England without my passport that I was so excited about going to Barcelona to the Champions League that I forgot about the flight, going from from Gatwick to Barcelona, and I forgot my passport. Would you believe? So it was only when I landed in Gatwick that I had no passport, and of course I was getting a connecting flight with all the supporters. So unfortunately, I mean, I missed the night there, but it wasn't the day in question. It was like we were going sort of a night before to have a night out in Barcelona, and I was very, very lucky. My brother got my passport from Rella, dropped it out to the airport, and one of the hostesses from Aer Lingus, who was on the next flight, he dropped it at the desk and he said, yeah, we'll take his passport over for him. So they were very kind. She came over. I met her at arrivals, but I missed the night in Barcelona the previous night, which probably, in hindsight, wasn't a bad thing because I might have missed the game itself,
Yeah.
But the game was quite incredible. The atmosphere was electric. We were absolutely battered for 80 minutes until those last 10 minutes were just it was just quite incredible. All fists to the pump, and they just threw the men forward and got the corner, got the goal, and then of course got the second goal. Well, all hell broke loose. You could see the Bayern Munich players all falling to the ground. United fans were like just jumping up and down. And at the end of the whistle, I always say I'd never seen so many grown men cry in all my life. Everybody was like crying, but there were sort of tears of joy. It was quite a surreal moment.
And you think of the team as well, like Peter Schmeichel, Ryan Giggs, David Beckham, the Neville brothers. You could go on and on. Like it was just an unbelievable team.
Yeah, I mean, it was an amazing, and of course, the unfortunate thing, right? I saw Roy Keane and Paul Scholes. They came out when United were celebrating with the cup, and they didn't make the final, because they were both suspended for the final. Unfortunately, I felt terrible sorry for them, but they came out to celebrate, but they didn't. It was almost like they wanted to be involved, but they were just sort of. You could see how disappointed they were that they sort of weren't there themselves, in a way, But they wanted to just let the team get on with it because they were on the pitch and they wanted it. But the crowd were going mad for Scholes and Keane to come on, and when they came on, even in their suits, it was just and they stayed. United, they stayed. They walked around the whole pitch with the cup dancing, and it was just it was one of the best nights as a United fan. I remember 1999. It's a long time ago now.
Unreal. Like I remember chatting to Clive Tildesley during an interview a couple of years ago, and like he was pointing out the fact that he was thinking, on his commentary, he had said for the free kick, the Bayern free kick, Basler deflected and in, but in hindsight, it hadn't deflected at all. It had just gone, I think, through the wall and past Schmeichel. So he says, last 10 minutes, he's sitting there thinking, the game hasn't been that great. I've got the only goal wrong in my first Champions League final on ITV. I've said it was deflected. It didn't deflect at all, and United are going to lose. But I mean, the commentary then for the last couple of goals, of course, you were in the stadium, but those last few minutes, Ken, it must have just felt
it was
surreal.
Incredible. I mean, they hit Bayern even at 1-0. I think they hit the post twice. It was just like, but just they never gave up. And I mean, that was one of the great things about Ferguson's team. They ran and ran and ran and ran and never ever gave up. So many times they scored goals in the last 5 minutes. We've seen them do it in the Premier, in the league, so many times. And they just kept going and going and going. It was a great engine. And I mean, for Solskjaer to come on and Teddy Sheringham to score, it was just quite incredible, because we thought it was all over, it was because Bayern were playing. So I mean, Bayern has such a great team as well. And they were just battering United, but you just never know in sport, in football, and all sports, even in snooker, you just never know until it's over, and you keep going as best you can, and that's exactly what they did, and they got their rewards in the end. Yeah,
I think it was Tilsley that said, can Manchester United score? They always score, and of course they did the dutiful and scored twice. It was quite an impressive moment for all United fans, one that will stick out. Another one, Ken, that you've put into your list then is a game that will live long in the memory because of one of the opposition players, Brazilian Ronaldo. This is Champions League, 23rd of April 2003. United winning 4-3 on the night at Old Trafford against Real Madrid, but of course Real had won the Bernabeu first leg 3-1, so United exited the tournament. But this was really about Ronaldo's performance, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I mean, so many games. I mean, I was at a Champions League in Rome when Messi played incredible, and they beat United in the final, and Messi scored a header. Like, it was great to see him and that Barcelona team. That was an amazing team as well. But I think the best team that I'd ever seen was Real Madrid that night. Ronaldo was playing, Figo, Roberto Carlos, Zidane was just a most amazing player, one of the best players I think I've ever seen. I think I remember Roy Keane saying, he says, you know, when he played against Zidane, he said that was the standard. He said that I had to aspire to, you know, because he was probably the best midfielder of his generation, you know, it was Zinedine Zidane, you know. And and to see that team and the way they played, and Ronaldo, of course, Brazilian Ronaldo, he got a hat-trick that night. Now, United, they still won 4-3. Beckham came on, he scored 2 goals. It was Beckham's last game for United. I think he joined Real Madrid not long after that, at the end of the season. And but Ronaldo, the Brazilian Ronaldo, how well he was, or how good he was, you know, his dribbles, his step overs. And it was the first time I'd ever seen an opposition player being applauded, and the whole crowd stood up and applauded Ronaldo when he was substituted, I think after 67 or 70 minutes. I've never ever seen that at Old Trafford, and I've never ever seen it since, but it was just an appreciation for his greatness. He was just a wonderful, wonderful player, and what an amazing team they were. They were the real sort of the Galacticos, as they were called, you know.
Myself and Shane are just looking at each other here when you mention Messi, Zidane, Figo, Ronaldo. Like, you've seen the best of the best.
Yeah, I mean, I was you know, like, with those matches, I mean, they don't come around very much, and they might not be around for a while as a United fan, you know. So you sort of, they're matches that you just want to go and see, you know. But yeah, I mean, to see the great Messi play was amazing, and Xavi and Iniesta in that team, that was. They were just unbelievable. But to see Zidane play and see Roberto Carlos and Figo and Ronaldo, the Brazilian Ronaldo, I mean, that was quite special as well. You know, that will live long in a minute. And even though we sort of were knocked out of the Champions League, and they didn't go on, I think they lost to Juventus in the quarter-finals or semi-finals. They didn't go on and win it that year, but they were just so good to watch. They were like the Harlem Globetrotters playing football. It was just amazing.
It wasn't AC Milan, I think, go on to beat Juventus in the final at Old Trafford, funnily enough, on penalties in that final. Just looking at the 2 starting lineups, Ken, from that night, the United teams, you had Barthez in goal, the back 4 of Brown, Rio Ferdinand, Silvestre and John O'Shea. You had Keane, Butt and Varane in the middle, and then you had Solskjaer, Van Nistelrooy and Giggs up top. And then for Real, you're looking at this team, Casillas in goals, a back 4 of Salgado, Hierro, Elguera and Roberto Carlos. Makelele and Guti kind of in the sitting role. Figo, Zidane and McManaman behind Ronaldo. So you're looking at a trio of just before that, recent Ballon d'Or winners in Figo, Zidane and Brazilian Ronaldo. Yeah. That team is just terrifying.
Yeah, it was just the front line was just amazing, you know, and as I said, it was just a wonderful spectacle, you know. And also European nights, you know, were just very, very special in any home ground, you know, whether it be Man United or anywhere else. It's just those European nights, Champions League nights are just very, very special. But when you have a team like that come in and glittered with, you know, stars and Ballon d'Or winners, as you said, you just sort of, you just had to be there. It was just wonderful to witness, you know. It was football from the gods, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely. Switching sports for your last pick, Ken, and this was tennis for the gods, really. The Wimbledon final of 2014. Yeah. So Novak Djokovic beats Roger Federer in 5 sets, 6th of July 2014 at the Wimbledon Centre Court. I know you're a big tennis fan. Like, this must have been quite special to be sitting in tennis court and taking in the atmosphere of a 5-setter and a decider like this. Yeah, well,
I picked this because it's one of my favourite sports. I mean, there was other sport like golf as well. You know, I could have picked the Ryder Cup down at K Club. That would have been a very special time as well. But this one, and this is a funny story really, because I was at Nebworth at a concert for Iron Maiden, and this is how it happened. This is how it all came about. I hadn't got a clue I was going to Wimbledon the next day. I had no ticket or anything like that. And the drummer of Iron Maiden is a big snooker fan, and he'd been to the World Championship that year, and I got introduced to him, and sort of we exchanged numbers, kept in touch, and got on really well with him. So anyway, he invited us the concert in Epworth, and so I went along with a couple of friends, and went in to meet the band afterwards, and we're in there sort of having the after sort of concert party, and he turned around and said to me, he says, "You like your tennis, don't you?" I says, "Yeah, I love it." He knew my son played tennis and that. He says, "I've got 2 tickets for the Wimbledon final tomorrow." He says, and one of the lads that I was taking, he can't go. He says, so he says, "Do you want to come with me?" He says, "Do you have a suit, first of all?" He says, "Yeah, I have a suit. I have a suit with me in the car, He says, "Right." He says, "You're coming to Wimbledon with me tomorrow." He says, "Djokovic and Federer." I says, "You're joking." He says, "Yeah." He says, "Where?" He says, "I got an invite from the head referee." So after the concert, he says, "You come back with me to London." He says, and he says, "Stay in my house." And he said, "We go the next morning." So he took me the next morning. Nico McBrain, his name is. He's a drummer. And he took me the next morning. He had his car pick him up, and we go down, and he's dressed up. He's got this like pinstripe suit. He's got an old sort of like fedora hat on, like a Havana hat. He looks like the man from Del Monte. And he takes me, and we're paraded around. We're in the members area. We're having lunch. There's all the old tennis players there. And the referee is showing us all the sort of backstage area, dressing rooms and everything. It was just quite incredible, I had to pinch myself. And then we go out into we're a couple of rows back from where the players sit. Absolutely brilliant seats. And he's wearing this hat. And I said, "Oh, jeez, Nick." I said, "This is just amazing to be here." And as we sit down, because he's got the hat on. This lady from behind him taps him on the shoulder, a real posh accent. She goes, "Excuse me, sir." She goes, "Do you mind removing your hat while play starts?" And he looks at me.
Thing ever.
He looks at me like, and I haven't got a clue what he's going to say, And he turns around to her and he says, "No," he goes, And he looked at me again, and I looked at him. I says, "Nico," I says, "you're my hero,"
Oh.
And I just go, it was just absolutely great. There was no way his hat was in the way in any way. She was just like trying to make a point.
Yeah.
And just the way he dealt with her. And he looked at me and we laughed, and we watched the final. It was like a pulsating final just to see Federer play, and Djokovic, of course. But Federer was my favourite. And Federer, he should have won. He was 2 sets to 1 up. He was 4-1 up in the fourth. Djokovic came back as he does. 1-7-5 to take it to a 5-setter, and then he won. Unfortunately, that was the only dampener of the whole day, was that Djokovic won. But yeah, you can't have it every way. But what an amazing experience, and to go with him and see everything behind was just incredible.
What a story!
That's unbelievable. I know the lads, Mick Jagger and Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones as well. So the fact that the drummer of Iron Maiden.
How does that happen?
I can't believe that.
How did that happen? Yeah.
I think that's my favourite pick out of You Had to Be There that we've ever had. To be fair, that's unbelievable. Ken, unbelievable stories, unbelievable picks.
We've been onto the centre court, but for the final was just to see those two play at their peak as well. Was you had to be there, as you guys say.
Absolutely. On that note, Ken, brilliant stuff. Thanks a million as always for your time.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Great stuff. That is the latest episode of You Had to Be There.